The genocide in the Gaza Strip continues to claim civilian lives at the same pace, more or less. And, along with each passing day, student protests at university campuses across the U.S. are on the rise, as if an American awakening has taken place. The U.S.'s grip with anti-Israel and pro-Palestine protests, leaving U.S. officials helpless in their efforts to crush them. Well, in this edition of the Spotlight, we are going to take a look at whether the Israeli regime will invade Rafah and the impact that would have on the U.S. relationship, including the world public backlash. This is while the Israeli regime and the Hamas resistance movement are involved in ceasefire talks. First, let me introduce our guests. Yves Engler, author and political activist, joins us from Montreal. And Yousof Azizi, an international affairs expert, joins us from Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, welcome. Yves Engler, I'll start with you. So we're taking a look at these student protests, and we know that Columbia is the epicenter of this over in New York, but now UCLA is vying for that spot, if you want to put it, if I should put it that way. But roughly around 40 universities are involved in this across the U.S. And what seems to be making the news more than the actual genocide that's taking place that the U.S. That the protesters are coming out for, you're having brute force used by the police violence and the number of arrests, beating down journalists or teachers is making news. What is going on there?
Well, students are saying enough is enough with their government and more specifically their university's complicity in the Holocaust that we're all seeing in Gaza over the past 6 or 7 months. And they're taking action, and they've chosen a certain tactic of occupying public space or university space. And the pro-Israel forces within the university, within the broader political structure, can't handle the fact that they are having these effective protests, and they respond with violence. And UCLA, we see two different forms of that violence. We saw 2 nights ago, we saw Zionist thugs, middle of the night, attack the protest or the encampment, and seriously injure multiple students. And then the next night, last night, we see the LA police shooting rubber bullets at 4 a.m. in the morning at people who are just literally camping out. And so this movement it has completely shaken the pro-Israel ethos of North American politics. I just came back from a McGill University here in Montreal, where there's a very well-organized big encampment, and the pro-Israel group in Montreal here tried to have a rally in front, and they got 300 or 400 people, but there's a big counter rally of maybe 800 people here in the afternoon, and in this case, the police actually, blocked the pro-Israel people from they're clearly trying to instigate a confrontation. But basically, the pro-Israel forces in North America are having a meltdown over the fact that students are against the horrors they're seeing, and they want their universities to divest from their complicity in these horrors in Gaza.
Well, it's one thing for the police to come to try to keep law and order. Yousof Azizi, I'm sure you agree with that. But it's another thing to look at some of the scenes which involved slamming women down to the ground, one being a teacher, another one being a U.S. presidential candidate. Not that their function or their profession should matter. Just the mere fact that you take a woman and you slam it to the ground conducting a peaceful protest doesn't make sense. And of course, then you have the students out there who are getting arrested and some brute force being used on them, which puts into question, are they being instructed, have they been instructed, the police, to use extreme violence when it came to the protesters?
So the answer for your question is no. It is absolutely not a right decision to, attack against a peaceful protest by university students, by university faculty members, against genocide, against what's happening in Gaza, and the people who advocate for immediate ceasefire. So it is not absolutely right. But the fact is, that every polls during the past months shows that the younger generation of Americans all either pro-Palestinian in this situation or are not satisfied by the way that the Biden administration, the American whole system, handled the issue. And they ask what's going on here. So there is a double standard between the liberal art courses and classes they got and they learn about that, and the way that the United States behave toward the international affairs, toward the people around the world, and why there is an exceptional behavior and relation between United States and Israel. So they have a very right question to answer, and they need response from that. And the fact that the younger generation is not following the mainstream media of the United States and in the world to reach to the news of the world. They go through social media, they go through the reporters on the ground in Gaza and other places in the world, and they have the facts that the United States behavior toward the Muslim countries, toward the Palestinians is not right, and they have the right to ask the question from their government.
Well, that's a very good point that you bring up there. And Yves, I'd like to address that to you. You know, you have these protesters. They are young, sure. They're at universities, so they're university age, but they have been accustomed, in terms of their psyche, to the number of wars that have taken place when it comes to the Palestinians by the Israeli regime. You know, we're not just talking about one or two wars, 4 of them in the past 15 years or so. So each time they're getting educated. And I think at this point, do you think that it's reached a point where they realize they have to take matters in their own hands, because neither U.S. officials or anybody else at this point is doing anything to prevent the genocide from happening?
There is absolutely no doubt that that's what is going through the minds of these student protesters. They are appalled by what they're seeing, the babies, the children, the women being killed in Gaza. And many of these universities, they have seen the previous phases of Israeli killing. There has been political organizing around Palestine that's been going on for many years. Concretely here in Montreal at McGill University, the students, 2 or 3 years ago, the undergraduate students voted 71% for a resolution, the Palestine Solidarity Policy, that called for basically divesting from companies complicit with Israel's apartheid system. The administration, the pro-Israel groups, basically got this all kind of thrown out, complicated way. They did this whole legal maneuvers. Then in November of last year, 78.7% of students, undergraduate students, in the biggest turnout in the university's referendum history, almost 80% voted for this resolution calling for divestment. Again, the administration, the pro-Israel groups went to the courts. They did this whole elaborate process to suppress this. So these students who have taken part of the campus at McGill, they have tried all of the official channels to have referendums, to go to the administration of the university to say, we have problems with this, and they've been ignored. And likewise, these same students, some of these same students have been part of these demonstrations in Montreal that have been going on for 30 weekends in a row. There's been mass demonstrations, and the politicians, the political structure has largely ignored the demands. Sure. And so they've taken it one step further, and they've occupied, they put up tents. In this case in McGill, it's about 100 tents in a part of the campus lawn that's not really bothering anybody, but it's very symbolically important. It's right in the middle of downtown. And so they escalated to that. It's a very peaceful way of escalating your demands and saying, we're serious. We're not just going to accept that our university, that our government is enabling these massacres. And so that's what's, variations of that are happening all across the U.S., obviously at Columbia and elsewhere, and now across Canada and elsewhere in the world.
Sure. Well, we have had the U.S. President Joe Biden, Yousof Azizi, make a statement in the past hour. I don't know if you're aware of or not about, in particular, what is happening at the UCLA campus. And basically the headline reads that he said order must prevail. Not a word about Gaza. When asked if these protests will change the U.S. approach, he said a flat out no. What do you think of his reaction?
Yeah, it is interesting that the behavior of President Joe Biden as a Democrat and President Donald Trump as a Republican on the issues of social and political norms in the United States is same. The order should be held when the people has the right to ask questions from their government action. And it is important to understand that these young people, most of them either voted in 2020 presidential election for Biden and Democrats, or one of the potentials to go and vote for Biden in the upcoming election in November. But the fact is the behavior of the United States, these double standards, these past 7 months, supporting all kinds of diplomatic and logistical and military support for the far-right movement and cabinet of Israel to make genocide, do genocide against Palestinians, make it very hard for Biden administration and Biden to for re-election. So I think he tried to kind of talking that what's happening in the university is a local issues, is about the university administration, about the local police and state police, not about my job as the federal government. But everyone knows that what's happening around the world, especially in the United States, against the genocide in Gaza is directly related to Biden behavior. And I think he lost a very good amount, not from the American, Arab American or Muslim American. It's about the progressive movement. It's about the younger generation that is very important factors in the election, the upcoming election. He lost all of them, and he tried to, to save his face. Also, he tried to make sure that the Israel lobby didn't get hurt from him.
Yeah, we need to talk about the Israeli lobby as well. I mean, Yves Engler, I'm almost positive you're going to agree with the fact that U.S. politicians, in particular the U.S. president, knows what's going on in the Gaza Strip. He realizes, after almost 35,000 civilian deaths, what's happening there. I'm sure he realizes that, if you agree with that. And if you do, his approach is to try to tame the situation. Forget about the genocide, because he's assisting that genocide to continue. I mean, when you pass this anti-Semitism law, which basically makes it illegal to criticize Israel, you could see they're jumping right away to try to pour water over the fire in order to make sure that these protests fizzle out, I guess, by enacting such types of laws. Doesn't just that show the disconnect to the whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, he's called Genocide Joe for a reason, because he's been enabling this genocide all along. I think that clearly Biden understands exactly what's going on, and I think 35,000 is too low of a number. We know there's 10,000 who are under the rubble or unaccounted for, plus lots of malnutrition and all that. That's a direct result of Israel's siege and lack of food and all that. And so Biden understands all that very well. He doesn't care. He's not based upon humanist motives. He is somebody who has been a close ally of the Israel lobby for 40 years. He is somebody who has been a ardent proponent of American military power going back to before he was in politics and supporting the U.S. war in Vietnam. So this is somebody who is a militarist, imperialist, pro-Israel character. I think that the effort to try to criminalize campus politics through this anti-Semitism bill, it's obviously odious. This is just the latest phase of this kind of process that's been going on for many, many years. I do think, though, contrary to what they're saying, that they are concerned about these protests. They're saying it won't affect their policy, and they're they're going to claim that all the way through. But I think that the Democratic Party is in the process of being ripped apart over this, and there's a very good chance that the convention in October or in August in Chicago is a repeat of the convention in '68 in Chicago, where there huge protests against Vietnam War, and the police violently repressed the protests. That dynamic is the likelihood of that dynamic is escalating with the campus protests and with the police response to the campus protests. So I think that the Biden administration is definitely concerned to the extent that we have a possibility of restraining a full-fledged assault on Gaza, on Rafah, that Israel is threatening. I think the most likely force right now that can restrain that is these protests continuing to escalate, that putting more pressure on Biden.
Well, hopefully.
Biden, holding back Israel from its most genocidal tendencies.
Sure, hopefully it'll do that. By the way, it's not 10,000 that have been injured. It's more like 70,000 or so, based on, I had to do a fact check on that. I thought maybe it was revised down, but no, it's 70,000. Anyways, you mentioned Israeli lobby, Yousof Azizi. AIPAC has been, the biggest lobby, has been very busy trying to target. They used to say this behind closed doors, but now they come out and say it. We've set aside $100 million. We're going to go after the lawmakers directly, and they're targeting Democrats in particular, one group being the Squad. I'm sure you're familiar with that phrase. And there are other Congress people as well, and they're looking forward to some of these, I guess, votes that are going to take place. They want basically to have an all pro-Israel Democratic Party, let alone the Republicans, which mostly are pro-Israel. Isn't that how they have been targeting and using their lobby influence in order to have all the lawmakers pro-Israel?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Also, we have to mention that they failed mostly during the primary election among Democrats to change the current this Squad, as you said, and progressive movement candidates within the Congress to the more pro-Israeli Democrat candidates. But the fact that Israel lobby working very hard is not about just politicians. And I remember 8 years ago at the University of Michigan, as my colleague also said about that, the students voted about the divestment, but that's about the BDS, boycott, divestment, sanction of the companies who are working on the occupied territory of Palestinian and have relation with the university. And it is interesting that the university administration at that time rejected the student request that voted by majority of the students. On the current issue, it is very important to understand that the students and faculty members of the elite university and other university, you mentioned 40, but my reading of the news is over 70 university and colleges across the United States. They go beyond that BDS movement. They wanted that all kind of Israeli lobby funding removed from American university. They wanted to remove of all Israeli influence in U.S. higher education, whether it is in technical degrees or the humanities or social sciences, because the money coming from Israeli company, the money coming from the relation between technical degrees and the IDF and the Israeli government to have a high tech for this genocide and other behavior against the Palestinian people. This money get the independent of the universities. The universities thrive within the making the communication, having free to express their opinions and have the free speech. But what's happening, we can see in the university across the United States, is that the Israeli lobby money just get the independent from the universities.
Well, the universities, especially the private ones, which are at the top of the list when it comes to endowments, are about making money. That's one of their things. Yves Engler, like a business. But when you mention endowments, at least I wasn't aware. I don't know if many people are. if you go look it up as to see, well, what are these endowments and the figures? These figures are shockingly high. Harvard University, around $50 billion. And then you have the others in the top 5 that are in the billions of dollars. I mean, if you take all the universities and add them up, you're looking at a few $100 billion there. And this divestment, there was a small story of success when it came to Brown University, where they said they're going to reconsider where some of this divestment comes. Maybe you can explain to us whether that is an avenue that is working, perhaps, and that whether the universities will really make that hard decision in their eyes to divest away from Israel, companies that Israel benefits from.
Yeah, I mean, I saw one estimate that said it was towards $1 trillion that the major American universities had in different investments from their endowments. So we are talking about an incredible amount of money. The divesting itself is a pretty straightforward process. It's actually lots of universities have divested based upon different social criteria. So my understanding is that Columbia University, the epicenter, they have divested from private prisons, and they also have divested from some fossil fuel companies, some oil companies or coal companies. I don't know all the specifics, but they have agreed to, they've done that. Here in McGill, they have also actually just in December, there was a protest movement over many years of climate justice activists, and they got the university to agree to divest from the 100 biggest oil companies, I believe, and the 100 biggest coal companies. So it's not at all complicated to get the universities to have different social criteria, including not investing in companies that provide weapons to Israel, or there's some other companies that are on the list. Sometimes the companies that have role in occupied West Bank. They support colonies in the West Bank. That's been part of one of the lists from McGill. So none of that's particularly complicated. One institution doing it doesn't mean that much economically, but lots of these institutions doing it, it can start having an economic impact. But the other, as my co-panelists pointed out, at McGill is also another, alongside the corporate divestment, there's also a call for, McGill has some exchange programs with Israeli universities, and so they've also been calling to end those programs. There's a whole series of programs that McGill has with Israeli universities, and a number of different U.S. universities have similar type programs. And I think most of the campaigns are calling for that to end as well. Okay. The thrust is the economic thing, and it's not a particularly complicated thing to do, right. And it's been done in the past.
Less than a minute. Israel is adamant to go through with that Rafah invasion, with or without a ceasefire deal. That's what the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said, Yousof Azizi. If more of a genocide takes place, what types of reactions will we see across the spectrum? Less than a minute, please.
It is hard to say, but probably the protests around the United States will grow. It's not just about the campuses and university students going through all the problem, that the social problem that the United States has, from the African American to the kind of economic problem. So the only motivation that could force President Biden to press Benjamin Netanyahu to not attack Rafah and end the genocide is the election. And it is very critical for American people to show the Biden administration that if he wanted to be reelected, he has to end this genocide.
Thank you very much for that. Let me thank our guest, Yves Engler, author and political activist from Montreal. Thank you so much. And Yousof Azizi, talking their international affairs expert from Washington, D.C. Thank you to you both. With that, we come to an end for this edition of The Spotlight. From Mikava Tagwi and the team, it's goodbye.